अनम्यूट कर दिया आपने?
Hello, Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Just a few more minutes. I mean, the company was still coming in. There were some weather problems outside. Some of the companies are coming from inside the facility and some are from outside. So a few more minutes and we'll start.
Okay.
Okay, just hold on. ये फॉर्म एक फिल आउट करने अगर आप लोग मतलब एक ही कंपनी से तो वन फॉर्म हैज टू बी फिल्ड आउट. अगर सेपरेट कंपनी से या एंटिटी से तो वो एवरीबॉडी हैज टू फिल आउट. ठीक है, आप देख लें जिस तरीके से भी आप लोग कर रहे हैं.
माइक आपका ऑफ है? कभी ऑफ है, ठीक है, फिर ऑन कर. आप बैठ जाओ सीट, और अगर कोई आए तो
Hello, good morning everyone and good afternoon here in Pakistan. This is Ahmed Kamal Janjua. We will start the session.
माइक ऑफ है, नहीं ऑन कर, नहीं वो ऑफ है. अब वो ऑन.
Hello Tamara, can you hear me? And Chris?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Chris, we're just starting up. Few people have arrived, and some of them will be joining online also. So we will start. So people will keep on coming in, and they will be joining this session. So I will start. Just give me 1 second. I'll just introduce myself, and then we'll just open up this session. I'll just hand it over to you then. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Ahmed Kamal Janjua. I'm the Chief Executive of Cosmic Space Systems Private Limited. We are based here in Islamabad. We are a private space company, and our major focus of work is in consulting. They are based in Washington DC, and they are consulting. They are based in Washington DC, and they are a management consulting company. And they help companies to learn different things about funding and international expansion, international access to different resources outside the country, and if they want to boost their companies. We also do work in space infrastructure, also provide satellite imagery. Actually, I had to give a presentation on cosmic space systems beforehand, like 10 minutes before, but since everybody showed up late, we can do this. I have a presentation which I can give it to you after this thing finishes up. So I will hand it over to Mr. He's the chief. I would like to introduce Mr. Christopher Hearsey. He is the president and CEO of OSA Consulting. He is here, and he will be giving some advice for the startups and in the technology sector, in the space sector also, and information technology sector. You will be able to learn certain things. So I'll just hand it over to Mr. Christopher Hearsey, and you can introduce yourself. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, good afternoon and good morning to some who might be in the U.S. My name is Chris Hearsey. I am the founder and CEO of OSA Consulting. I've been invited here to speak to you all about international business and my experiences and what it takes to do some international business when dealing with aerospace technologies with other technologies, IoT software. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. First, before we get started, I want to thank the National Incubation Center for Aerospace and Technology, Pakistan, for hosting us today. I also want to thank Ahmed Kamal from Cosmic Space Systems for putting this together, and I want to welcome all the attendees. Thank you for coming out and speaking, listening to us today, and I'm looking forward to speaking with many of you. What I think we plan to do with this agenda is I'll just sort of introduce what my business is, what we do, and then go over sort of the life cycle of a startup and some main areas that are important, whether or not you form a company and do business within your domestic market, or if you want to go overseas, depending on the area. Can you guys still hear me?
We can hear you. Can hear you.
Okay. So I want to point out that I want to leave some time at the end for questions, and I approach this entire conversation generally knowing what the types of companies are in the area, but I didn't get into specifics. So if you have questions later, I'm happy to answer those, although I'm not an expert in a lot of different fields, but I'm happy to help you when it comes to general business approaches. So this is our core team. It consists of myself as the founder and CEO, Jackie Forte is our chief of staff and our business manager, and Tamara Bogdanovich, who is our senior associate and client manager. We do have a partner in Africa and in Portugal who works with us on selected projects, and we have a lot of other partnerships other than those with other companies, and we form partnerships with companies to handle a variety of different activities for different types of clients if they need it. Some selected projects that I've engaged in over the last couple of decades, in particular the last 6 years, include satellite mission management, satellite services, human space flight, space media, community building, and IoT. So here are some of the companies that I've had as clients or worked for in the space industry, and have worked with some of these companies to demonstrate technologies in space. So what do we do at OSA? One of the primary things is we work with early stage tech and space startups. And we walk them through the whole life cycle, and we take them where they are. So when we go out and speak to prospective clients, what we're evaluating is where you are sort of on this life cycle and where we can help you best. So we've had clients start at number one, at the idea and concept. We help them mature up the pathway. We also take clients who are more sophisticated that may be approaching either a seed round or a Series A round, and either have a demonstrated technology or built something, and they need to take the next step. So whether it's product market fit or basic operations or licensing, we get them all the way to maturity and optimization. But in the intermediate, we help them get demonstrations, we help them navigate the complexities of compliance. It depends on what the product is, what the service is, and what market you want to get into. We also do market research, so we also help tailor companies, international companies, whether or not they either want to break into the United States markets, or the European markets, or other markets. We have some experience dealing with a few countries, including the Emirates. We've done some projects in India. We've had clients in the U.S. and Europe. So we're very familiar with a variety of different markets, and so happy to talk to you about those as well. So I want to really start today because I think this is the most important area to start, especially if you are just getting started or if you're thinking about expanding your business. You probably hear a lot about, well, someone will conduct due diligence, right? And who will be that person? Well, it could be a lot of different people. It could be finance people. It could be the government looking at, are you compliant with what you're expected to do in that jurisdiction, especially if you're doing international business. But just to give you some basic categories of what is due diligence, what are the elements that go into evaluating a company for a variety of purposes. But in particular, it's a good exercise that I go through with all my clients, depending on what stage they are. Either they're building towards this, filling in all this information, or they've started down this road and we need to get them a little bit further and make sure that we plug any potential paperwork holes, so to speak. So obviously the number one thing is financial due diligence. It's just making sure that you keep your numbers in order with respect to appropriate accounting standards or bookkeeping standards, for example. This is legal due diligence. While OSA is not a law firm, we don't legally represent clients, but we can help them with contracting, with negotiations, and with licensing and navigating regulatory systems depending upon the jurisdiction, depending on the country. And this is also reflecting operational due diligence, commercial due diligence. You want to make sure you understand your market, your business, for what your product is, how you manage that product is really important. So another aspect of that is hiring, so human resources due diligence. Are you hiring to what you need? Are you hiring to other requirements that might be had? Because, for example, if you want to do international business and you want to do it, say, business in Norway, and there might be an accelerator there that you want to get into. Well, there's going to be requirements about establishing residency there. That could be done through a lawyer, and you create a shell company, and then you got to hire people. So you need to understand what the costs are to do that, because maybe you want to put a sales team there, for example. if you're just starting out, you also want to make sure that you have a strong executive team with the appropriate subject matter experts, as well as advisors who can advise you in different aspects of your business. In some cases, environmental due diligence will be necessary. That's important, especially in the aerospace world. Tax due diligence, obviously, that goes in hand with the legal and the financial. Working with an accountant or lawyer to help you set up those tax structures appropriately and meet your business goals. Increasing issue right now for all tech companies is IT and cybersecurity. If you take, if you apply for space agency grants, you want to work with somebody that works with the space agency, there's going to be all kinds of IT and cybersecurity requirements that are going to be on you, especially if you're a subcontractor or a vendor, potentially. Intellectual property, are you protecting your IP? Are you protecting your trade secrets? So do you need to think about a patent? Do you need to think about other ways to protect your IP? Reputational due diligence obviously takes a little bit longer to establish, but is something that, depending upon your product, if you take off very quickly, have you established it so that you can make traction in your market, and sometimes that also goes with checking against cultural norms, which you might be familiar with. And then there's just the compliance overall due diligence. Are you overall doing what's required? Because maybe you're operating in Pakistan, but maybe you're operating in Singapore, so they would have a different set of rules. You have to make sure you have set up resources for that. So, I set the stage with talking about due diligence because these are the areas, all these different things are what's going to be asked of you as you build out and scale your company at some point. So navigating the startup life cycle. Okay, so I want to start with ideas and concepts. For the rest of the conversation, what I'll be going through is the different areas that I mentioned: the idea, concept, the planning stages. I've put the top bullets here that I think within this frame you should either be familiar with, or if you need help, this is something that we do for clients. But I'm not going to overly focus on every bullet point. I'm going to pull out in subsequent slides the focus of what I want you to get out of this section of the presentation. So starting with the idea and concept phase, right? The most important thing is you need to do your business planning and your strategy funding, and your product market fit is the top priorities, right? You need to understand when you form your business, are you doing it to all the local rules? So you may want to talk to a lawyer or other professionals to help you set up, let's say, in Pakistan. You also want to have that funding strategy. You want to understand eventually how you're going to pay for things, how you're going to build things, and what you're going to do to pay for those things, and how you leverage the value of what you're trying to build. But in particular, no matter what you're building, whether it really is a product or a service, is it fit to the market? And if you don't have it aligned to the market to solve a market problem, it's quite likely that there is no customer for you. So being sensitive to nuances in the way that you present your product, how you design your product, how you approach your product, and what it's ultimately trying to achieve, needs to fit into this overall model. And then lastly, in particular, understanding, the market itself. Do you understand other players? Do you understand the price points in the market? Do you understand the challenges, barriers to entry, etc.? So there are processes that you can go through. These are things that we can help with that are important to building out and eventually scaling the company. So in the context of international business, here's just some examples of things you need to keep in mind if you want to do business outside of Pakistan, and in particular if you want to do it in the US or Europe. So making sure that you have a strong compliance and legal department. Make sure that your founders and your board understand political and economic risks associated with going into additional markets, international markets. understanding, what it takes for market entry, what is the industry knowledge that you don't have because you don't necessarily have access to particular industries. Obviously, the funding and financials, how you go about it, is going to vary from country to country, and it's also going to vary on your goals, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then obviously looking at, what other alliances and team compositions you need to succeed. If you want to expand to one or more countries, do you want to target in particular cities? You want to make sure that if you do have a service or product, who's going to be more likely to consume that product? Government entities or commercial entities in large cities or in small cities. So these are all different considerations that goes into international business, things we can help you with. And as you're thinking about the idea and the concept, you want to keep in mind how you balance sort of the risk, and you want to be capital efficient as much as possible, because every startup dollar, every first dollar that you have coming in, no matter if it's from your own pocket or from friends, family, other sources, investors, every dollar counts. It's all going to be measured towards, are you building to what you agreed to build, and are you doing it in a way that's responsible, fiscally responsible? These are the things that investors certainly want to see. This is how you build value. And more importantly, when you start up a company, when I see a lot of clients, they get really hyper fixated on the immediate, the short-term goal, maybe some medium-term goals. But sometimes they don't have the long-term goals in mind, and sometimes they put that off for a long time. And I really try to caution them, like, listen, at the end of the day, you need to understand where you want to go. It may be more than one place that you want to go. Physically, yes, in the universe we live in, you'll eventually end up at one place. But where do you want to aim yourself at is the important bit. And these are things that you have to understand, especially with your market. What are the revenue cycles, the ups and downs, the good days, the bad days, the good years, the bad years, and making sure that you have the capital and the resources to be able to survive. So that's really important, and coming up with budgets that are 6 or 12 months longer. I had clients that will have large monthly revenues and expenditures, and they're budgeting 3 months out, and it's not efficient, and it gets them into trouble. So, and then lastly, about that is also looking at where you want to be with the company in 12, 18, 36, 42 months, whatever it is, whatever your goals for your business are. So one of the things that everyone should know is sort of like the basic areas where you can find some of that funding and resources. So grants, you can obviously have grants within the country, you have grants outside the country for different types of products. It's always good to look where you may not expect, especially if there are NGOs in your product service areas. They may have money to even test. So you never know. Incubators, you're in one right now, so that's a good start. Accelerators, that's sort of graduating to the next thing. You got to get a little bit more developed. And then there's a variety of different investor funder types that you should be familiar with. So angel investors are high worth individuals. They only really give in really early stages. The venture capitals are sort of they take a little bit more risk. They raise capital. The problem is right now, over the last 2 years, the capital markets have been up and down a lot. Interest rates might be cut soon in the United States, so you might see changes in the way people are deploying capital over the next 6 to 12 months, especially as the election in the U.S. gets resolved. There's private equity firms. Those are harder to get to. They require a lot more due diligence and an understanding of your market and your product. And there's government agencies, in particular space agencies or technology agencies, but there's also agencies that might use your product and service that are outside of probably your service sector. It happens a lot of times. Space assets being a perfect example of that. Space resources, space data can fall along different industries. It can be used in a variety of different ways to do what you want to do. Corporate investors, that takes a little bit more maturity. That's more of a long-term, you establish yourself. But That's not to say that it doesn't happen from time to time, depending on what corporations are either in your target market country. You may have different capabilities different opportunities to work with different companies to develop different capabilities that could go into a different product. It's been popular over the last decade or so. It's been crowdfunding platforms. Those are I think, case-by-case basis. If you have a really good idea and you think you can get started very quickly, crowdfunding may not be the right thing for you to do. But if you need a little bit of cash to try to get a proof of concept, crowdfunding can be a great way to do that. Sort of depends on the economies of scale of your product. And then there's institutional investors. Again, those are harder to get to. Those usually come in later in a business cycle process. As I mentioned, focusing on product market fit is really important. So for example, when dealing with software, while software is quite ubiquitous and you can try to market it and sell it in just about any country, when doing international business, you need to understand, obviously, who your competitors are there, and understand whether or not someone has a superior product. And so, is this something that you want to aim at? You want to figure out how to do that better. So understanding what your competitive products and services are is really important, because then there's marketing is the differentiator here. But you really need to understand how your market and your product works. So there might be cases where you have to also understand what your intellectual property rights are. There might be export control issues that govern your software, depending upon the software. The closer you are to satellites, the more likely that your technology, your software might be export controlled. Doesn't mean that you can't use it outside of Pakistan. It just means that dealing with countries that deal with the United States and the United States itself might require licensing, and that's a cost, and that's something you should be aware of. And I don't want to scare you about this, but this is the cost of doing business. And this is very routine. This is stuff I do. Like most of my clients I bring over to the United States, I'm usually doing some export control for them. Focusing on the product and failing quickly is another thing I really want to point out. Don't think that the first idea you have, your first demo, right, is going to be the one that's the marketable one. Keep innovating, figure out when talking to users or potential clients or customers, figure out what works, what doesn't work, what's helpful, what's not helpful. But getting to these issues as quickly as possible is important to moving your company forward. Missing some critical elements is going to put your company behind in development. Alright, so planning and strategy. Alright, so again, these are the top subjects. I won't go over all of them. But hiring a core team is really important to initial success. You have to have people that really know how the team needs to function and what needs to be happening at any given moment, whether it's at the executive level, the manager level, the worker bee level. The pitch deck and pitching your business is very important. Different investors will want you to frame the pitch deck in different ways. So due diligence ahead of that is important. But also knowing how to pitch your business is important. Being concise and clear and upfront about what you're trying to accomplish is something that first you need to convince yourself. Then there's also introductions, accelerator preparations, product management, IP, branding strategy, technology manager strategy. These all go into the basic planning. So, as I said, focus on building a strong team, I think, is one of the top things that need to be on your mind as a startup founder. You need to, one, be very honest with yourself as a founder and understand what are you good at and what do you want to focus your time on. And I can tell you, working with early stage founders, you can't do everything. I know that you want to, and you may be trying to, and you have, but at some point, you have to scale up in time. You can't divide yourself into a clone to do more work, so you need to be cognizant of, who do you have around you working with you, what partners do you have, what partners do you need that you don't have, and what are those skill sets? And some of the common things I find is usually it's a technical person needs a business partner, someone that will understand operations, do the basic business stuff, because they just want to focus on the product, they want to focus on building stuff. That happens very common. Less common, but it does happen, is a business person with a great idea that needs a technical person, but it does happen. Understanding the subject matter expertise also, depending upon your product, the more complicated your product, the more expertise you're going to need. If you're getting into telecommunications, you're going to need radio engineers as much as engineers who understand how to build the receivers and transceivers themselves, or put them together, right? Or IT people understand how the network all works, and knows how that licensing works, and it integrates those processes into to your business. Ensuring co-founder fit is very critical, because the risk there is very high, right? That if you can't get along with your business partner, highly likely your business isn't going to succeed. So getting someone, as I said, not only with your skill sets, but also to complement your skill sets is important, but also that shared philosophy and approach to doing business is important. So as you go along and think about, what kind of founders you need, you want someone that complements you. How you want to define that really is up to you. I think it's a personality thing. If you jive with somebody, if it works because you can work without pushing each other, or if you need that push, right? It just depends, and that's kind of the fun part of starting a business. The last thing that I think is really important here is that advisory team. As soon as you get to the point where you're moving, you're building your process, you're building processes, you're building the product, you're starting to think about hiring more people, you want to make sure that you have an advisory team that can help you put checks on things, because as you're moving every day, trying to move your business forward, you don't have the luxury to learn a lot of different new stuff. It's going to come across, and so you want to rely on your advisors who may be subject matters in certain relationships you need for business. Maybe they're with government, maybe with the commercial sector, maybe with funders, maybe with vendors, suppliers, maybe with investors. So, there's a lot of different reasons. You have to tailor it to your needs, but really think about what resource or what access to resources, what degree or way of resources you need to move your business forward. Another thing to keep in mind is sort of the stage of funding and the funding rounds. Excuse me. So the idea stage, right, you're bootstrapping, you're asking friends and family for money, maybe you're crowdfunding. Excuse me, let me get some water. So you're taking what you have, what you can get, and you're making something out of that, right? Then you want to get into the pre-seed stage. Okay, so this is the time where you're maturing the idea, you're doing all the research, you're getting all the documentation together, you're doing your due diligence. So once you do that due diligence, now you can go to angel investors, because they're going to want to see a lot of this stuff. Now you can start applying for grants, because they're going to want to make sure that you have the established business, you have all the reporting done, and that, when they give you the money, that you're going to actually use it responsibly. Then there's the seed stage. Now, the pre-seed to seed stage can come in different phases, and at least in the US and European sense, you can kind of break it out, because it really depends on if you have an investor, usually like a venture capitalist, that will be a lead investor, because that's between the pre-seed and the seed stage. What you're really seeking is an anchor investor, a lead investor, that you can go and get a commitment from for an X amount of dollars for your business. And based on that, then you go and you start talking to other investors. And it's much easier to talk to other investors when you're asking for a fraction of what you want, and knowing that a lead investor that can commit to some dollar amount makes it much easier for some limited partners to do that, other funds to do that. So that's what's going on there. But once you get through that seed stage, what's going on, at least in the U.S. sense, is that your capitalization table that tracks everyone.
Now please connect with us here. Firewall. Now put the firewall.
Chris, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear us? इसको दबाओ.
Recording in progress.
Can you hear us?
You're back.
Yeah, we are back.
Yeah, they're back.
Alright, can you hear me?
Video.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes?
Yeah, okay. Alright, so where did I leave you? Do you want me to go back a slide?
No, this side. It was this side, I think, and
Is this where you
Can you one let's record it.
Is this where we left it? Is this where we dropped? Where
Yes.
Ahmed?
Absolutely. Yeah, this was the one.
Ahmed, you're muted.
Muted.
Yeah.
The laptop is muted.
Yep. Okay, we can hear you.
This side.
Yeah,
This slide's not there?
yes, affirmative.
Okay. Alright, so we talked about, alright, so if that works, yeah, so we talked about building a strong team, and the co-founder fit. So going over briefly the different rounds that you should be familiar with as you fund your company. So early stage, it's bootstrapping, friends and family, crowdfunding, finding your way to get some money in the door to put the business together and to maybe get a demo or get a study or whatever, hire someone like me to help you get started. And then the pre-seed stage is the next phase. And the thing to keep in mind there is, you want to work on your due diligence here, because if you're going to go to angel investors, which is where they start out, they're going to be looking for documentation. They're going to be looking for, do you know what you're talking about? Do you understand your product market fit? Do you understand where you're doing business, who you're doing business with? Are you attracting customers? What your funding strategy are? So that due diligence bit is very important. And this is where it comes in the first instance. Now, there's also grant opportunities, but again, you need to have the business formed. You need to make sure that you have certain elements of the grant requirements met. That could be, do you have the appropriate subject matter experts, and can you demonstrate that? Then there's the seed stage funding. So as you move to this, what you're looking for is an anchor investor or a lead investor that you can use to leverage conversations with other limited partners, other investors, because they hear that a lead investor will put up some portion of the round amount, and at the seed stage, you're talking anywhere from about $500,000 to about $2 million US. I'm sure that's a little bit lower for Pakistan, but that's the general rule of thumb. And those limited partners you would go to, right? They will talk to the angel investors, they'll talk to the lead investors, and they'll all be on the same page about what you're doing, and you'll give them updates, and that's usually how you start this relationship with investors. You're still applying for grants at this point. Depending on, some countries have small business opportunity grants. Just depends on what they're doing locally. The point is that you want to graduate from seed stage to Series A. Now, at the Series A level, what happens is that, at an equity point of view, price round is triggered. So before then, you're working on developing your capitalization table, making sure that's secure for investors, you're tracking everybody, you know what everyone's price per shares are, you know how they're getting it, if it's options or convertible debt or some other mechanism. You're getting all that due diligence done, and then once you get to the Series A, you have a lead investor, they close the round, they set a price for your share, and now you've started this process of perpetual fundraising if you need it, right? Some companies, they need subsequent rounds, series rounds, especially if they're trying to make larger investments, either in the technology development itself or infrastructure. Some don't need it anymore because their product actually produces revenue. So then you have to make decisions about whether or not you need additional capital or whether you can subsist off of revenue and grow the company that way. But at this point, you can also consider other accelerators, more mature accelerators, depending upon your product. And then the subsequent rounds, again, like I said, they can come from different folks, but eventually what you're getting to is either keeping the company private or taking it public on some sort of stock exchange. There's different mechanisms for that. You can list as a corporation, you can buy a shell, you can do a reverse merger. There's a lot of different mechanisms. I don't do a lot of that stuff. It's where you want your lawyers to do that. But this is the connections between the finance strategy, the legal side, and compliance. This is how all this works together. So it's important because there's always going to be funding challenges. The last 2 years in particular for the space sector, investments have been difficult. The SPACs, the special purpose acquisition vehicles that you may have heard about 6 years ago or so, Redwire, Voyager, a few others, they sucked up a lot of capital in the market. Now, obviously with inflation and interest rates and things like that, the market's still sorting itself out with the presidential election in the U.S., plus signals by the U.S. Federal Reserve for lower interest rates. It's quite likely that in the next 6 to 12 months you're going to see the capital be raised and deployed. So those are good signs. And so obviously this will come with different strings that you need to be aware of, different risks, especially market risk. And so these are things you need to keep in mind. So seeking strategic investors is sort of the point. These are things that we can generally help you with. We're not a broker dealer, but as far as finance strategy goes and pointing you in the right direction, making some introductions, we can do that. One thing that I want to stress is anytime you do talk to investors, make sure you do your due diligence, make sure you know everything you can find out about the person, the firm, how they get their money, but in particular, whether or not they're raising or deploying capital. Because if they say they're just raising capital and you need that capital, it's probably not going to be deployed for months, maybe a year. So they may not be worth your time to spend a lot of effort on. But if they're saying that they are thinking about deploying capital, those are the people you do want to talk to and do give the pitch to. In the former example, you run the risk of, and this happens quite often, investors that say they want to talk to you, but they're not actually going to tell you whether or not they're actually raising or deploying capital, but they're doing market research. And sometimes they have competitors that they invest in, so they want to see what's out there in the market, so that's something that you should keep in mind. So that's overall investor strategy to think about here. The thing is, you always leverage the ecosystem that you're in and that you want to be in. So whether it's incubators or accelerators, you want to make sure that if you look at those institutions, organizations, that they fit to what you are doing. If you are doing aquaculture and the accelerator is for robotics, you better have a really good pitch about how robotics applies to aquaculture. Otherwise, you're going to get your application rejected. They're also going to be measuring you on a certain level of maturity. You should understand and ask each individual accelerator what is the minimum requirement or the basic requirement for the application to be admitted. Sometimes it's a business plan, sometimes it's more sophisticated. No one's necessarily expecting you to have revenue, but if you do, that's great. And they should be also, on the flip side, tailored to your needs. When you apply for these things, what are you trying to get out of them? Do you need mentorship? Do you need introductions? Do you need facilities? So these are different things to keep in mind. But either way, getting into an incubating center gives you exposure. It's really important, and there are some international ones that are open, so that's another thing to consider and look out for. The other thing that's important is as soon as you start thinking about doing international business, and even if you're doing it domestically, always look at who else is adjacent to you that you can work with. Who could be a partner? Are there any other startups that have some piece of what you're doing that you can work together on? That can be helpful going after grants as well. All right, so next, early development cycle. So these are the important aspects that you should have mastered to get to this level. Again, where we help you is, have you done your MVP testing? Have you identified your first adopters or customers? How do you identify a customer? What is the development stage of doing that? How do you retain them? How do you set sales and other pricing, service pricing? Do you have your operations streamlined, especially if you're manufacturing? And then again, hiring is really important to scale. Focus here that I want to focus on is, look at commercial opportunities always first. Then look at government. There are many instances where I've seen folks develop a technology and get very narrow-minded about the industry that it needs to be applied to. And in many cases, it can be applied to other areas. So, for example, let's say that you're really into asteroid mining. You really want to someday send a satellite to an asteroid, have it pull out resources, return to Pakistan, or sell it on the market in space or something like that. But in order to do that, you realize I need to develop a satellite that, maybe your niche isn't robotics. Maybe it's you're an electrical engineer, and you want to create a photovoltaic system to melt down elements. Okay, that's really a great application for space. You just put it in a vacuum, but you should be talking to mining companies, for example. So sometimes, you want to look adjacent to what you're doing, but you also want to look beyond sort of your immediate sector. If it does have use, there may be other sectors in other countries where it may have a utility. So you want to evaluate that, and in doing so, balance it against the compliance risk, barriers to entry, and any other data requirements, because especially if you're dealing with software, every country has its own laws and regulations about how software is to be stored, collected, secured. So these are things that you need to keep in mind. I put an emphasis on space data. Space data for most things is cost prohibitive, but there are areas where you may want to build that into a model. You may need to do for your product market fit. You may need to develop to understand your commercial landscape, or even figure out how to deploy your product in a proper way. I can help facilitate those introductions and get some pricing for you, and explore other commercial opportunities. Obviously, you should know that there are limitations on space data. There's a policy called shutter control. Certain governments can prohibit space data from being sold in the commercial market, either with respect to the country itself or to different spectrum that you would use to sense the surface. But different types of remote sensing data, it helps everything from agriculture to land management to mining to farming. So these are important aspects that is being used today. All right, so launch and growth is the next. So obviously sales pricing, you're making your business approach way more sophisticated. By this time, you should have an executive or a managerial business development person, and they should be either developing these processes or implementing these processes or refining these processes as much as defining them. So at this point, you haven't scaled yet, but you're preparing to scale. And so the review is, what does your cash flow look like? What are your capital raise requirements in the future? Either in the next 3 to 6 to 12 to 18 months. Where are you? Are you pre-revenue, or are you getting revenue now? Supply chain, cost. It's really important. It's one of those most tedious things. I'm sure many of you have gone through this process, but making sure you understand the time, material, tax, and duties, license fees. What is the cost of working through the logistics of implementing your product and getting it to market and getting it to the customer? All these things need to be defined and evaluated, and making sure you put the resources to cover these. Procurement timelines, obviously shipping, delivery, contract milestones, depending upon if you have a grant or if you have a commercial agreement to perform services or sales. Staffing, as I said, subject matter, and your resource burdens, right? If you scale internationally, how much is it going to cost to hire 1 or 2 people, to get an office, and making sure you understand, what is your return there, right? There are companies that will spend $250,000 to $350,000 a year to create a sales office in the U.S. from Europe, right? And so you want to make sure that you balance out, well, is that the best use of your money? Marketing, lead generation, do you have that down? Have you done your prospecting? Have you rated your prospects? Have you created a metric to rate your prospects? Do you want to rank them? How do you want to rank them? You got to have that in mind to be able to understand how you're going to develop your relationship with customers. And then making sure you have the appropriate marketing materials that will get people to call you back and buy your services. And then another, so the most important thing here, technology demonstrations. What do you want to do? How do you want to demonstrate it? I've done for clients physical demonstrations with different companies, including Fortune 500 companies. Basically, they take their product, I find them a partner, and then they work with a prospective client to demo on-site that technology. We've done that with IoT several times. Software, I've done the receiving end of those demonstrations. But the other thing I want to point out is testing location. So whatever your product is, also make sure that you understand where you're going to test it, because testing in the desert is a completely different cost environment to testing in space. So those are things you need to consider. How do you want to scale? If you want to go suborbital, going to space, again, different than going to orbital space. So these are different areas that you need to consider to be able to test your product. All right, so now you're going to scaling and expansion. So you want to expand your markets. You want to make sure you have your international business plan set, your international marketing and branding, because eventually you're going to run into IP issues. There are only so many words in the human language, in any human language, and the phonetics of that sometimes seem very reducible, and so you want to make sure that whatever you want to use domestically can be used internationally, that is understood, that's identifiable, that's not confused with the brands, because if you do decide that you want to name your space business Disney, you might have some problems outside Pakistan, or Star Wars, something like that. So, these are things that people really seriously take to heart, and they will go after you legally. They don't care where you are in the world. Obviously, finding international financing customers, partners, all part of the same sort of cycle, but now you're doing it at a different level. So at this level, some of the main concerns that have become very apparent is making sure you protect your IP, making sure that you don't, especially as you develop partnerships, give away any IP in the relationships or grants, that you give away rights to your IP to other parties, because that's also going to affect your funding if it turns out that somebody that you didn't realize now owns part of your product. So you have to make decisions. Do you want to copyright? Do you want to trademark? Do you want to patent? Or do you want to keep as trade secrets? And if you have trade secrets, then you need to have those internal due diligence controls to be able to make sure that anyone outside the company doesn't get that information and harm the company. And then regulations become very, very big. As I mentioned, there are lots of areas of due diligence they need to consider, from licensing to export control, and making sure compliance processes are set up and that there are annual trainings. And then, you want to make sure that you understand what the policies within your business sector, within that country are, as well as the international issues, not only between Pakistan and your target market, but within international organizations and institutions, because you'll eventually run into them and you may have to work with them. Or they could also end up being a customer or a potential partner. So if you have certain software, you may want to partner international software certification companies. A lot of that's going on the sustainability side globally, so it's to keep in mind that if you have a sustainability angle to your product or service, that you can find partners that will work within that domain. All right, so now we're getting towards the end. So now, at this point, we're talking about companies that are approaching Series A or just finished a Series A round, and they really want to take off. They've really gotten a lot done, and so there are things that are prospective and reflective. And prospectively, you want to look at, do you need to pivot in the market, or do you need to pivot with your technology? Happens all the time with companies. And that is going to be important to know what the answer is by making sure you know what your long-term business goals are. Eventually, you want to have a good audit process, compliance process. If you have a large enough company, you can mostly automate as a startup much of that, but at some point you probably need someone to make sure that they're keeping all the records properly, whether it's on the cloud or stored locally. You need, as a founder, you're responsible, especially if you're the owner of the company. You want to make sure that someone, if it's not just you, has access to those files and knows where those files are. And so when you think about what you want to do, and you want to scale, and you want to mature, you want to review what you're doing and seeing where you, again, want to pivot. So one thing you're looking for is other market signals. Market signals are coming from you from a lot of different directions. They're coming from conversations with investors, with partners, with reading news, trade press, talking with potential clients and customers, talking with the government. These things are constantly evolving, especially in tech. The changeover I see is usually about 6 to 12 months, but is usually when we have cycles. We'll start through. These cycles will consist of even terminology change. Sometimes in new technology spaces, people adopt one term and then they realize it's not correct, and so they start pivoting. Usually governments anchor their terminology, but being savvy to that is important to communicating, especially to investors, because the investors are also talking to the government. They're also talking to all these other players, so they know where you are in the business. You want to make sure that you understand whether or not you are getting traction with your product or service, right? Are people calling you back? Do you need scripts? Do you need to think about changing your approach? Are you targeting the wrong client base? Are you doing it in a way that's not effective? Do you have the resources to be effective? So these are all different things you need to look at. And if you start noticing that some of these questions do have answers that you did not expect, or facts have changed, then you got to think about how you want to pivot. So having an open mind, but also having clear business sense and business goals will constrain you veering too far off. But this sometimes it could be you're focusing on an individual element of a product. Maybe it's like a sensor, or maybe it is a software. But it turns out that if you add a sensor to your software, your market grows by some amount. And this is what you have to do when you do your initial market research. So you always want to look out for that. Maybe you want to scale a product up, maybe you want to scale a product down. And maybe you want to add services, maybe you want to streamline services. So all of these different things will affect your focus, and also maybe reevaluate against your business planning and your finance strategy. But as I said, as you go through this, you will find failures, you will find errors, you will fix them. You innovate quickly. It's the best way to move forward. Look for practical solutions first. I sometimes see with startup founders that they want to hit a home run with their idea. They think they have the best idea, and they probably have a good idea. But the thing is that you need to whittle down good ideas to its core element. And once you understand its core element and its value, then it's easier to build that back up and look at how it could be used in other sectors, within your own sector, how you can combine it with different elements. Because I've seen even satellite companies that started off with, maybe they were building a hyperspectral camera, and next thing you know, they decided to become a remote sensing company. That happened in a matter of 6 months. They did all the research, they knew how to build it, they wanted to build it, they wanted to bring it to market, all they wanted to sell was the sensor. Next thing you know, founders, the team, they decided, talk to people, they changed their mind, they scaled to a different type of business. Perfectly fine. But that's the flexibility and the dimensions that I want to point out that you have as you move through all of these phases. So as I said, think beyond the immediate market. There's your long-term vision, there's your short-term execution, but make sure that you have your milestones, your KPIs, your key performance indicators set. If you know that you need to do prospecting, you need 250 leads a month, and that 250 leads a month, 10% call you back, That's 25, about 25. And let's say that 25, 1 in 25 becomes a customer. So that's your baseline effort to be able to do business development. So that's just I'm making up those numbers, but that would be your general sense. And one other major aspect here is make sure that you understand where you want to go with your company. You're either going to scale or you're going to sell your company. Now, when I say sell your company, I don't necessarily mean that you're going to sell all of it, although you can if that's your goal, but you may want to sell a majority share. Maybe you want to be a minority shareholder. But, that is a personal thing that you need to figure out for yourself and for your partners. I've helped clients figure out how to navigate that. Sometimes there are founders that want to exit early, and so they need to figure out how to negotiate with their partners on how to clean break. Maybe they are going out on good terms, maybe they're not. The other aspect of this is, if you're scaling, where do you want to exit? Do you want to exit at a share price, or do you want to exit at a round? What is your number? And that's always an important thing to have in your head when you start. What is your number? What reasonable number? I'm not talking about, no one's ever going to give you $1 billion for, $1 billion idea. But what you value, when you look at your research, you talk to people, you put your premium on it, what is your walk-away number, right? And so whatever that number is, right, that's your goal. You can always change your mind, but it's always something to aim at in terms of an exit, because that can help shade how you approach investors, how you deal with partners, and it can give, and I say this, if you get this done early, it gives everyone peace of mind. If you do it too late, especially right before trying to close a Series A round, that's when you will get problems with your founders. People will start objecting, people will start getting angry, maybe they start raising questions about the share allocations you originally agreed to. So getting this issue resolved initially at the beginning is I think critical. All right, so with that, thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions, and I've left some information on here. If you want to email us at info@saconsultingdc.com, that should go to Jackie, and we can help answer any questions. And for your convenience, I also add the LinkedIn page, and the QR code should go to our website. And if you, I'm happy to schedule meetings. What I tell everyone is, we can do a 15, 30-minute initial consultation, figure out what you need, and then see how we can onboard you if you're interested in our help. I also lastly add that in our conversations with Ahmad, we are working on commensurate pricing, so I'm not going to charge you what I would charge in the US or Europe. But if you guys wanted to talk about anything that's a cohort or anything like that, or any individual pricing, I'm happy to work with you on that. I'm flexible. My goal is to help young entrepreneurs and founders get their ideas to market, and in particular, if you want to go to space, my whole mission and passion in life is to send people and things to space. So if I can help you do that, please feel free to contact us. Thank you. I'll turn this over to you, and I'll keep the presentation up unless anyone wants me to go back to it. But I'll go up to the beginning, and I will wait for questions.
Thank you so much. अगर कोई आप लोगों के questions वगैरह हैं, तो if you want to ask anything, do you have a question? Okay. Just introduce yourself and then you can ask the question.
Hi, OSA Consulting. Thanks for the presentation. Really, it was a fruitful way to get to know how to get.
Could you get closer to the laptop? Yeah.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, so basically I'm working on battery technology startup, working on sodium-ion batteries by the name Power Sodium. My question was, how important is founders' agreement when it comes to due diligence, and what sort of key items should be included in the founders' agreement to ensure that they don't, sort of become an issue later on when we are raising funds and talking to investors and all.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. The unfortunate answer is it depends, because it depends on what all of the founders feel their contribution is worth when they get together, right? What's critical is to get this in writing as quickly as possible, as soon as you have agreement. How you want to structure that, if you want to have sort of loose, broad language or very undefined interests, keep in mind that those are all risks when you do that. Because if there is a dispute, at some point a court's going to look at it, and they're going to look at a contract, and every contract, every lawyer, every court's going to look at the plain meaning of the contract. Did the parties intend for this? So if you say you have a founding team of 2 people, and you both agree, and this is just a rule of thumb. This isn't something, it's up to you. But a rule of thumb is consider 100% interest. 40% will go to partner 1, 40% will go to partner 2, and 20% will be allocated, and this is in the US EU sense. 20% will usually be allocated, of which that 20% will be broken down into 2 categories. The first category is 10% will be set aside for employees. So this is technically it's called the ESOP. I don't know what the acronym stands for anymore, but basically it's like the equity performance plan. So if you want to give equity to employees, this is the set aside from the beginning, like ground zero. The other 10% is what you would usually allocate for angels or lead seed investors. And so that allows you, so I use this metric allowing you to sort of say, okay, well, if you're going to give an angel or a seed investor, especially a lead investor, 10%, okay, well, they need to be leading the round, they need to be deploying capital, and, you need to have all these things sorted out. But from a founder's point of view, right, if you say you may get interest between this and this, you have to get all of this sorted out before you go to a price round, and that starts in a Series A round. Before Series A round, whatever side deals or other agreements that you have, they need to be resolved, because the moment that a Series A round is closed, that's it. Whatever that price, whatever that document says the company's valuation is and the price shares are, that's it. Whatever other side agreements, will either get thrown out if there was a dispute, right? Or be invalidated, because they usually have a clause that says this is it. Any discussion that happened prior is no longer valid. This is what the parties have agreed to. So you want to make sure that you don't give away more than you need to, and 2, you don't take less than you deserve, right? Depending upon how you want to look at it. Giving more than you need to. So I know some founders will be like, okay, well, I'm going to start at 80% because I have the idea. And that's fair, but I can tell you that doesn't last very long, because at some point you need to bring in a lot of people and you need to divvy up that 80%. So if you're going to start in your mind, I'm going to allocate that 20% in the way that I said, right, future employees and the lead investors, angels, I'm going to eventually have to break up that 80% that I own. And so some of it may go to my partner, maybe I give 5% to 3 partners. Okay, well, 5% again needs to be evaluated against the effort of what you're doing. But if you're someone that's doing a lot of work, that 5% is probably not going to be enough. And again, you have to, you have to measure the work, output, but these are the areas where you can get in trouble and where you want to mitigate. So as long as you articulate, what the deals are and you don't violate, and also you want to make sure that as you figure out all the different contracts, you have a way to go through and make sure that you didn't do anything that was either anti-competitive, or against local business practices or business rules. And there's certain things that you have to be careful of, like you can't, unjustly enrich somebody else, so it can open you up to litigation. But, again, if you're starting at 80%, you got to know how much you're willing to give up. Okay, so then from the founder point of view, how much are you really willing to give up if you start at 80%? Usually what you want to get down to, by the time you get to the price round, is sitting between 40 and 50%. That would be nice. What usually happens is as you get towards the Series A round, a founder usually will get reduced to about a 33%, going about a third. Maybe on about 40%, up to 40%. And then, what you have to keep in mind is every subsequent round I noted, right, the Series A, B, C, every time you do a new round, you get diluted, because you have to bring in new money, you have to allocate new interest. Now, what should be happening is the price share goes up, and if the price share goes up, that's generally great for you, but you don't want to get diluted to the point that you get kicked out of your own company. So there are all these sort of management strategies that will be fact-specific to your business and your company, but these are things to think about in a partnership agreement, because these are all the areas where you're likely to get conflict.
All right. Yep, thanks a lot for that. Just one more question about the vesting. What do you suggest vesting for about the schedule? Like once you have raised your pre-seed round and you've already working on the startup since last 1 year, is it better to sort of get monetary compensation for the last year, or would it be better that you sort of have some of the shares allocated already and then go ahead with the vesting schedule?
Sorry, with respect to, which round?
Pre-seed round. So it's like we've been working on this for a year now, and now we're almost about to raise the funds. I was just wondering, is it better to get monetary compensation for the past year which we've worked on, or it's better to sort of have those shares allocated already to us, and then how do you mix it up with the vesting schedule? Right.
Yeah, so, again, it will depend, because it really depends on your circumstances. There may be circumstances where you don't initially take compensation up front, right, at the pre-seed stage. And that's expected. So that's totally expected. If you have the resources, and let's say, for example, you need to pay 3 people, like you have to pay 3 people. You have to pay 3 people. Like that's how you move your business forward. Mm-hmm. So if one of those 3 people is the CEO, okay, well, again, that's for you guys to decide as a team if that's appropriate. But what you're worried about is, are they getting paid, 10,000 rupees a month or 150,000 rupees a month, right? So that's extreme cases. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, and there's an interesting thing that happens when you move from pre-seed to seed and seed to Series A. If you do not pay your executives, and they're just like taking only equity, you could run into a problem with investors. And the logic is that, one, by not paying your executive team what they should be paid, so let's say an executive salary is $10,000 a month, but you're paying, let's say, $3,000 in cash and $7,000 in equity, right? That's fine. Like that could be fine. That could be totally fine. Again, keeping within the extreme limits. The problem is, if you don't pay in this period, what you do is you skew your financial numbers. And to an investor, what it will look like is that your costs are much lower than they are really in reality. Because what should happen is at some point you should have drafted compensation agreements with schedules. So at some point, you will say, to be different triggers, like at a certain revenue level, this is how much you'll get paid, or have salaries, or they'll do it at will, but this will be the guaranteed salary, and then here's your options, and so best, and all that good stuff. But you have to be careful when you do transition towards the seeds, and when you have funds, assuming you're going to have funds. So if you're pre-revenue, you should be getting, hopefully, non-dilutive funds in, maybe like grants. But if you do get dilutive funds in, right, you're probably doing them in, I don't know what agreements are permissible in Pakistan, but in the U.S., basically things called a safe agreement. So basically it's like a sort of a trust agreement. Then there's things where they can take that trust, you can convert it into debt. So if something happens with the company, they're in a position with the debt, and if there's bankruptcy, they could be paid out first. But then they can convert that debt at a price round, usually Series A round or Series B round, and then that debt is converted into shares. So there are different financial strategies depending upon what you are looking for around this stage, but it will be dependent upon your financing laws, the jurisdiction of the financing laws, and things like that. So these are the things to keep in mind when it comes to transitioning. It seems like what you're talking about.
Sure. All right. Thanks a lot for the answers. Anyone else have questions? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much for this enlightening session, first of all. Okay, I have a question regarding, because I am working on a space edtech startup. So can you hear me? Again, I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
You said edtech?
Yes, I am working on edtech startup. It is related to space sciences and rocketry in Pakistan. So my question is basically in Pakistan, in third world countries or like developing countries, the situation is kind of changed. Most of the people, their primary focus is not space science or rocketry, but someone has to start this in these countries too, so that they can move ahead. So I just wanted to ask you that what should we do to add to our value in our goal here in Pakistan? Basic crux is that we want to impart space education to the children that are having age limit from 5 till 15. So what can be specific points that we can have, or what can be specific points that we can inculcate in our startup, so that it may add to our value, it may add to value of our mission and our objective. So this was my question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So you said ages 5 to 15?
Yes, I said the age that we are targeting is 5 to 15. Basically, they are students, children who we are targeting. So what can we add to our startup or our goal that can add to the value of our initiative? So what would be your suggestions for that?
Yeah, I would say school outreach obviously is your first starting point. What you're outreaching about is explaining what's going on with space and technology, especially globally and within Pakistan, how Pakistan is benefiting from domestic and international space development. So first and foremost, what you probably want to start off with is really basic, like how do you get to space? What's in space? How does space affect what we do in space? And what are the things we can and can't do in space, right? for that audience, you can intermix different things, about technology, like, if you want to understand how rockets go, you can look at it from the chemistry point of view. Do you like chemistry? You're interested in chemistry, right? Well, dealing with rockets is dealing with really fun chemistry, right? You take different elements and you set them on fire. But once you get to space, right, you see Earth from a different point of view. You see Pakistan from a different point of view. You see the world. And you also see other elements in space, and there's elements in space that you don't see that are touching you, from space weather, to interference caused by aurora, or potentially high energy radio or other electromagnetic bursts from black holes. These things affect satellites. Right? Space is a very dynamic environment. One reason why it's hard is that it's very easy to fail in space. So when you build a space company, you're working towards reliability. You're working towards building something that you can utilize. And so what are you utilizing? You're utilizing a network. You're connecting a network. So imagine all the people in your neighborhood that have computers. Find someone that's several miles away that has a computer. Two things are going on. One, if you want to talk to that person from where you are, and they're several miles away, all that data that's going back and forth between you is going through satellites. Guaranteed. Right? And second, if you think about the distance between where you are and the person you're talking to on the computer, it's a couple miles away. Think about throwing that computer a couple miles up, and that's where satellites are. And so thinking about how satellites will evolve as thinking computers, right? You can make jokes about Skynet, and you've probably seen the Terminator movies. But realistically, what's happening is that we're trying to learn how to sustainably operate space. Because right now, we send space objects, satellites, to the desert of space to die, and that's it. We don't really have full cycle logistics, full cycle usability, or services. But we're getting there, and you're seeing that with the global movement towards the Artemis program that NASA and ESA are leading back to the moon. All the infrastructure will be trailing. But more importantly, there's already infrastructure now that's providing resources that can be utilized by companies, by governments, by classrooms, and sometimes, it also invites, if the resources are there, those students to potentially build their own CubeSat and work with a company like yours or with the university's incubator to develop something that can eventually put into space. So people are doing that now. I mean, the UN, Office of Outer Space Affairs, I think has a program to help you get your payload to space if you can't, get a ride anywhere else. So there are programs that have developed and are maturing right now. And so explaining how dynamic things are and how global they are now, I think is probably the biggest takeaways for young people.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your answer.
Chris, I think that's about it. There was a few questions, and I think we'll just wrap it up, and we'll get some feedback from some of the other startups here. And do you want to conclude something?
Ahmed, you were distorted there.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, so.
Actually, I was saying that just wrap it up. We don't have any other more questions. We will do some more research here, get you some analysis on these startups. And it was an excellent session. It was really valuable information that you have provided. can summarize after this meeting. I can summarize some of the points of these startups. You want to conclude something or end up?
Well, I just want to say, yeah, thank you, Ahmed, for organizing this. Thank you for everyone who came and attended. I have given backup slides to Ahmed if you would like to look at them. Looking forward to speaking to anyone. If you have any interest, feel free to reach out. You can check out our website, check us out on LinkedIn. And thank you to the National Incubation Center for hosting us.
Definitely. I will provide all your information to NHTP and NICAT, and we'll be looking forward for more feedback from these startups. Then inshallah we will set up the festival in Dubai. So thank you so much. Thanks to Mara and Jackie to be here in this meeting. See you soon.
Thank you, Ahmad. Thanks, everyone. Be sure to reach out.
Thank you so much, and thanks for taking all the time so early in the morning for my briefing. And we'll see you this week.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Have a great day.